Videodrome, directed by David Cronenberg, was released in 1983, stars James Woods. This is a film that I wanted to talk about for a number of reasons. I wanted to talk about a David Cronenberg film. He is a very unique director. He is someone who definitely has a style, both visually and thematically, that's almost, his name's now almost a byword for sort of disgusting and subversive themes and imagery. And for me, there's no film that better exemplifies David Cronenberg's style and ideas better than Videodrome. It's not his best film, I don't think, but it's the most Cronenberg of Cronenberg films. And watching it again today, I think it's available on Netflix. It strikes me as one of the most prescient and one of the most continually relevant films that I've potentially ever seen. So I'll get into that in a minute. I'll discuss. I mean, the film does have a plot. It's a sort of mystery plot, if you will, that focuses on James Woods' character Max, who runs his own sort of cable television program in Canada, and he scans through sort of radio signals and television signals as they were in the time, looking for sort of subversive and violent programming. He's a smut peddler, essentially. His job is to seek out material that is just, dreadful, basically. And James Woods portrays the character so well. He's one of these. He's an actor who, if he's in a film, it's something that's always a draw for me. His characters are always very. He does this sort of creepy characters very well, but he still manages to have quite a lot of charisma. I mean, in this film, for instance, he's a bit of a slime ball, I guess you could say, but he's still sort of charismatic. He's entertaining to see, and it's something that I think he carries into every performance that he's done. But in the course of the character's work, he discovers this sort of pirated TV signal known as Videodrome, which seems to be exclusively like sort of violent imagery. And the mystery unfolds from there. It's a deeply intriguing film, and I think what makes it very special is the themes of the film, is the philosophy of the film, and it's a film that really benefited from hindsight. It's a film that was potentially 10 or 20 years ahead of its time. So when this came out in 1983, it didn't do well at the box office. Critically panned. It wasn't very well liked. But it's a film that, with the advent of the digital age, the internet age, social media, it's aged phenomenally well, and a lot of the ideas in it are more relevant now than they were 40 years ago, which is quite astonishing, really. In the 70s and 80s, people made a big deal out of sort of media philosophy. You had figures like Marshall McLuhan, who directly influenced Cronenberg and this film, warning that excessive use of television and screens and mass media was actually quite harmful to people psychologically, spiritually, whatever you want to call it, physically. And this film really does go well to encapsulate that. So I think David Cronenberg's philosophy, he's said this before, he views all technology as an extension of the human body. So a car is an extension of the leg, basically. You're in a car traveling somewhere as opposed to running. A telescope is an extension of the eye. Things like that. But then television is a curious one, because in Videodrome, television is presented as an extension of the mind, essentially. It's in the way that the film sort of sells this metaphor is by having some some quite gross imagery of technology literally being an extension of the human body. You know, Max's hand turns into a sort of biomechanical gun. Um, he is, I mean, okay, I was going to try and not spoil much of this film, but I'm going to spoil it. The mystery of the film is unraveled. Videodrome is like this political conspiracy almost that these television signals, the violence in these television signals is used as a trigger for like training for brainwashing people, essentially brainwashing them into becoming assassins, which is quite creative, and I'll get into why I think that's so prescient and so interesting in a minute. But basically, Max is like literally being programmed. You know, he has a slit in his chest that they put like these sort of biological looking videotapes into, and it's really disturbing. I mean, it's not an easy film to watch, certainly, but it is. I mean, that exists really to sell the philosophy of the film, and I think it's really important. It's not. I don't feel like the violence in this film is gratuitous. Really, I mean, it's selling a story. It's selling a message, which is really interesting. Um, but the reason that I find the sort of political assassins development in the plot quite interesting is when you look at this film today. I mentioned that this film is aged very well. Um, the message that technology is an extension of our body and of our minds is really relevant today, I think, because if you, I mean, especially when you read reports these days about just how deeply things like the internet and social media are able to influence people, able to influence their decisions, their thoughts, their emotions. I think it's really it's really quite worrying. And this film really seems to predict that. Almost it predicts the ability of technology, of I guess now the internet and mass media to literally program people. I mean, you read reports. You know, they had the what was it, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where you know social media was selling people's data, and it's so that advertisers and the like can directly influence people through technology. Um, to buy certain things, to vote in certain ways. It influences their morals. It influences what people want from life. I mean, it's kind of crazy how I mean just how much social media can influence people's moods. I mean, it's something I've experienced in the past. I mean, I'm sure most people would agree. And I think that's what Videodrome sells the best. It's the message that mass media itself is something that is directly influencing us. It's directly influencing our minds, our morals, our everything about us, really our essence. And for me, that's why the message of Videodrome remains very strong even 40 years after it was released. It's more relevant today, it's more interesting today than it was 40 years ago. So it's a very well made film. It's a very thematic film that works. It works on a superficial level. You know, you've got that mystery story. James Woods is charismatic. It's an intriguing story, and it plays the balance quite well, I think, because as the film goes on, you know, Max is hallucinating these violent things, and the line between reality and his hallucinations is depicted very well, I think, because it's not a jumbled mess. You know, it's cleverly done, and it's a film that I just think is quite unique, quite mesmerizing. Interestingly, the lead female actor in the film is played by Debbie Harry, who I guess older viewers might know as Blondie from the 70s band, which is kind of weird. I mean, this isn't the kind of film that you'd think a sort of 70s pop star would want to make a name for herself in. I mean, I looked it up. This was like one of her first film credits, and I thought that's kind of strange. You know, she went from singing Heart of Glass to, you know, being involved in this really sort of seedy and disturbing film by this weird director from Canada. But I suppose there you go. So Videodrome for me is a very special film. It's one that it's just so prophetic, really, when you watch it and when you start to explore its themes, because so much of it is 100% relevant today. You know, in the 80s, and I guess to an extent today, people worry about the effects of violence and sort of mature content in films and TV and media on people's brains. And there are arguments for that, but this film kind of turns that on its head. It makes almost kind of pokes fun at it, actually, because it's not the violence in and of itself in Videodrome that's causing people to become brainwashed. It's media itself. And I guess that's something that we'll continue to see the effects of as the years go on, as technology becomes even more entrenched into our lives, into our work, into our family lives, our friendships, and I guess we'll just have to see how it goes from here. As a film with a continuing message, it's brilliantly made, perfectly acted, and as a rating, I'm going to give it 82 out of 100, which is a rating that reflects the continuing relevance of its message and the expert of David Cronenberg's ideas and his directorial craftsmanship.